You're looking at a photo taken in August 1910. It shows a boy around 7 years old standing alone in the front yard of a Victorian home. He's dressed in a neat sailor outfit and holding a large black umbrella. Even though the day looks bright and sunny, at first, it seems like a typical Edwardian family portrait, with a child posing seriously for the camera, the way children often did at that time. But in 2024, when a photo restoration expert digitally cleaned up the image and brought back details hidden by more than a century of fading and damage, she noticed something that made her contact federal authorities right away. This photo was more than a simple picture of a boy. It was a last known photo of a child who disappeared 3 hours later and was never found. The restored image revealed important details that investigators in 1910 never saw, details that pointed to what may have happened to him, and helped clear up a mystery that had gone unanswered for 114 years. In March 2024, photo conservator Dr. Linda Chun received an unusual delivery at her studio in Portland, Oregon. Inside the package was a heavily damaged photograph discovered during the teardown of an old home in Salem, Massachusetts. The property at 412 Wickham Street had been empty since 1952. While removing a basement wall, workers uncovered a hidden compartment containing a single-framed photo that had clearly been placed there on purpose. The image showed a young boy, about 7, standing outside a Victorian house. He wore a white sailor suit with a dark collar and held a large umbrella. The photo was in rough shape with water stains, fading, mold, and other damage, but the main layout was still visible. On the back, written in faint pencil, was a note: Benjamin Ward, August 14, 1910. Gone by sunset. God help us all. Historians traced the house in the photo to the same property where it was found. Records showed that the Ward family lived there between 1905 and 1911. Newspapers from that time confirmed that on August 15, 1910, the Salem Daily Register reported that 7-year-old Benjamin Ward had vanished the previous afternoon. He was last seen playing in his front yard between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. His mother, Alice Ward, said she had checked on him around 2:15 while preparing dinner. When she called him inside at 5, he was no longer there. There were no witnesses, no sounds of trouble, and no signs of where he might have gone. A follow-up article 1 week later said the search had found no clues. Police looked through the neighborhood, the nearby woods, and the river. They questioned neighbors and visitors passing through the area, but nothing turned up. Benjamin had simply disappeared. By September 10, 1910, another article reported that the Ward family had left town, saying they could no longer stay in a home. They never returned. The house remained empty for years, later had various tenants, and was abandoned again in the 1950s. Benjamin Ward was never located, and the case stayed open without answers. No one knew the family had hidden a photo in their basement before leaving, taken on the very day their son went missing. Dr. Chin was hired to restore the photo for historical review. The damage was extensive, with fading, water stains, mold spots, torn areas, and missing parts of the original surface. You could see the boy, but most fine details were lost. The restoration process took 3 months. Using advanced digital tools, high-resolution scanning, and modern repair methods, Dr. Chin was able to recover details that had not been visible in more than a century. When she opened the completed restoration and zoomed in closely, she noticed details that deeply unsettled her. The image showed far more than a young boy holding an umbrella. It clearly pointed to what may have happened to Benjamin Ward, and it suggested that his disappearance was not what people once assumed. As she studied Benjamin's restored face, hands, clothing, and the shadows around him, she realized the boy appeared to be signaling something. It looked as if he left a message inside the photograph itself, a message that hinted at what he knew and where he might have gone. In the damaged original, Benjamin's face looked blurred and washed out. You could only make out the general shape of his features. After the restoration, everything changed. His expression became clear. Dr. Chin brought in Dr. Marcus Reed, a forensic psychologist who studies expressions in old photos and historical cases. His review was troubling. Benjamin's eyes were opened wider than normal, showing a noticeable amount of white around the irises, a sign of fear. His pupils looked unusually enlarged, which can happen during extreme stress. His gaze wasn't fixed on the camera. It was directed slightly to the left, toward the person taking the photo, with a look that Dr. Reed described as desperate. His eyebrows were lifted and drawn together, forming vertical lines between them, a common human expression linked to fear and distress. His mouth was slightly open, with soft shaking visible as a faint blur from the camera exposure. The corners of his mouth were pulled down, and the muscles around his jaw appeared tight, suggesting he was under severe emotional strain. This was clearly not a relaxed child standing for a simple portrait. Dr. Reed's written evaluation stated that the boy showed every sign of intense fear. He explained that this was not the kind of nervousness a child feels when posing for a camera. It looked like a child who was frightened and trying hard to show that fear while being told to stay still. The most concerning detail appeared when Dr. Chen examined Benjamin's eyes at the highest zoom level. In the reflection on his enlarged pupils, she noticed two tiny mirrored images. These reflections showed the people who were behind the camera taking the photo. Using specialized forensic tools, she cleaned and enlarged the reflections. Even though the images were small and slightly warped, they were clear enough to recognize. There were two adults standing together behind the camera, both facing Benjamin. Based on what they were wearing, a woman's long dress, and a man suited appeared to be his parents. They were standing close to the camera, side by side. Their position suggested they weren't simply standing there. It looked like they were standing on either side of something important, blocking it from view. After consulting optical experts, Dr. Chen learned that the reflections lined up at the front door of the house. This meant Benjamin's parents weren't photographing him outside, because it was a nice afternoon. They were standing in front of the doorway, preventing him from going back inside. His frightened expression now made sense. It appeared he knew he was being kept outdoors for a serious reason and was trying to show that in the photo, hoping someone in the future would understand. Dr. Chen checked the date written on the back of the photo. It was taken on August 14, 1910. The shadow suggested the picture was captured in the early afternoon, somewhere between 2 and 2:30. Benjamin was last seen at about 2:15 and reported missing when he was called inside for dinner around 5. This meant the photo was taken just minutes before he disappeared, and the people taking it were his parents. Another important detail appeared when Dr. Chen enhanced the umbrella Benjamin was holding. It was a large black umbrella meant for an adult, not a child. He was gripping it tightly with both hands. The restoration revealed that his hands were squeezing the handle so hard that his knuckles showed in lighter tones. This wasn't a relaxed hold. It looked like he was holding on to it for comfort or protection. The umbrella's position also stood out. Instead of resting at his side, it was held up in front of him at chest height, almost like he was using it to guard himself. When Dr. Chen magnified the surface of the umbrella, she noticed the fabric had unusual marks. These marks did not come from old age or photo damage. They appeared to be stains from a strong cleaning substance. A textile specialist, Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, studied the scans and reported that the streaks matched discoloration left by harsh cleaning chemicals commonly used in the early 1900s. The pattern suggested the umbrella had either been used to block the splash of such a substance or had been touched by it. The marks seemed recent at the time the photo was taken. Dr. Chen looked into how such chemicals were used in 1910. They were common in heavy cleaning products and in mixtures used to break down organic material. But another detail about the umbrella concerned her even more. When she studied the shadow cast on the ground, she noticed the shadow didn't match the smooth shape of a closed umbrella. Instead, the shadow showed uneven bumps along the length of the shaft, as if something had been wrapped around it. A physics professor who reviewed the shadow confirmed that the shape suggested something round or cord-like was wound around the umbrella, likely 1 to 2 inches thick. Dr. Chen zoomed in on the area where Benjamin's hands held the handle. Under his fingers, she could see something faintly wrapped around the base. It appeared to be some type of rope or thick cord, and when she enhanced the area around his wrist, she found faint light lines on both sides of the skin. These marks looked fresh, with the skin slightly irritated. Benjamin was holding an umbrella that had chemical stains, had something wrapped around its shaft, and he had marks on his wrist that matched the shape of rope. This was no ordinary umbrella and no ordinary portrait. These were signs that something serious had happened and that more was about to unfold. Dr. Chen's next discovery came from enhancing the ground around Benjamin's feet. In the original photo, the yard looked normal. After restoration, the area where Benjamin stood looked different from the rest of the lawn. The ground directly under him was bare and looked recently disturbed. The shape was roughly 4 by 6 feet, with soil that did not match the surrounding grass-covered yard. A forensic archaeologist, Dr. Robert Martinez, examined the enhanced images and responded immediately. He said the soil color and texture showed clear signs of recent digging and refilling. The rectangular shape and the way the soil had settled suggested a pit roughly 4 to 5 feet deep that had been dug and refilled within days or possibly even hours before the photo was taken. The size of the disturbed area matched what would normally be recognized as a grave. Benjamin was standing on soil that had clearly been dug up and filled back in only a short time earlier. The shape and measurements matched a burial-sized pit. But what Dr. Chen noticed at the edge of that disturbed ground was even more alarming. When she zoomed in on the border between the bare soil and the surrounding grass, she saw something at the surface that had not been fully covered. It looked smooth, curved, and pale. She sent close-up images to forensic anthropologist Dr. Helen Kowalski. Within an hour, Dr. Kowalski replied. She said that while she could not make a formal finding from a photograph alone, the object strongly resembled human bone, possibly part of a skull or a larger bone from an adult or older child. Its size, shape, and color all aligned with that possibility. If it was bone, it meant someone had been buried there and the soil had not been filled in completely. Dr. Chen reviewed the restored photo again, this time focusing on Benjamin's stance and the position of the umbrella. He was standing right at the edge of the disturbed soil, not directly over the center. His feet were placed as though he was trying not to step fully onto the filled-in area. The umbrella tip rested on the ground right next to the exposed white object, almost as if Benjamin had placed it there on purpose, drawing attention to it. A child psychologist, Dr. Amanda Foster, reviewed the image and noted that if Benjamin understood or sensed that someone had been buried beneath the ground where he stood, and if he was being required to pose there, the fear on his face made sense. His careful placement at the border looked like avoidance, and the umbrella tip might have been his way of quietly trying to point something out to whoever might see the picture later. Someone had dug a grave in the front yard of the Ward home. Someone had buried a body there and filled the soil back in without fully covering it. And someone then positioned 7-year-old Benjamin beside it for a photograph taken only hours before he vanished. Dr. Chen gathered her findings and reached out to the FBI's cold case team and the Salem Police Department. Detective James Morrison began reviewing the original 1910 files and uncovered information that had been overlooked for more than a century. He found that the Ward family had once included 2 children. Records show that Alice and Thomas Ward had a daughter named Margaret, born in 1899, and a son, Benjamin, born in 1903. But the 1910 census only listed 3 people in the household, the parents and Benjamin. Margaret's name was missing. A death certificate dated July 1910 stated that Margaret Louise Ward, age 11, had passed away from respiratory failure related to influenza, with Dr. Howard Mills listed as the attending physician. It also claimed she was buried in the family plot at Green Lawn Cemetery. When Detective Morrison contacted the cemetery, he learned there was no record of Margaret's burial. There was no Ward family plot, and no burial matching her information. The death certificate was real, but the burial never happened. With a court order, investigators used radar equipment to scan the property at 412 Wickham Street. They detected something beneath the ground, exactly where Benjamin had stood in the photo. Excavation began, and at a depth of 4 feet, they found the remains of a young girl estimated to be 10 to 12 years old, buried in a simple grave. Tests showed the remains were from the correct time period. The examination showed that the child had not passed away from illness. She had been harmed, and her body had been quietly buried in the front yard. Margaret Ward had not died of natural causes, and the truth was never reported. Her younger brother had witnessed what happened to her. Detective Morrison found one more piece of evidence in old family papers. A letter written by Alice Ward to her sister dated August 13, 1910, the day before the photograph of Benjamin was taken. In it, Alice wrote that her husband insisted they handle Benjamin the same way they had handled Margaret. Benjamin had seen everything and had told them he might speak up. Alice wrote that they feared their secret would be discovered and that a decision had to be made. She asked for forgiveness and said they planned to act the following day. The letter had not been destroyed. It had been kept and hidden. On August 14th, Benjamin was placed at the edge of the field ground where his sister had been buried. His parents took his picture. The umbrella he held showed traces of cleaning chemicals. The rope-like material around the umbrella shaft suggested it had been used to restrain him earlier. The faint marks on his wrist supported the same idea. The photo was taken around 2 in the afternoon. Sometime between then and 5 o'clock, Benjamin disappeared. Investigators believe his parents took his life and hid the evidence, then left town soon after. Despite modern searches, no second burial site has been located. Benjamin's remains have never been found, but the photograph he left behind holds the signs he tried to communicate. His posture, the umbrella, the disturbed ground, the exposed object at his feet, and his expression all point to what he understood and what he wanted someone in the future to discover. It was not a normal portrait. It was a record of a child trying to warn the world. And it took more than 100 years before anyone finally saw what he was showing. More than a century later, we can finally see what this single photograph was trying to show. A small snapshot, hidden behind a false wall for decades, carried the truth that everyone missed in 1910. It held the fear in Benjamin's face, the signs in his hands, the strange condition of the umbrella, and the disturbed ground at his feet. Every detail worked like a quiet message. He could not speak up at the time, so he left what he could inside the frame. Dr. Chen's careful work revealed that this image was not meant to be a family keepsake. It captured the last moments of a child who understood far more than anyone realized. The experts who studied it brought modern tools to a story locked in old paper, faded ink, and damaged film. Each restored detail helped uncover the life of a boy who tried to say, in the only way he could, that something was terribly wrong. The discovery of what happened to Margaret explained why Benjamin looked the way he did. It explained the fear in his eyes and the way he stood at the edge of the disturbed soil instead of in the middle. And it explained why the photograph was hidden so carefully. It was the one thing that could reveal what books, records, and reports never showed. Even though Benjamin's resting place is still unknown, the truth about him is no longer lost. His photograph has become the record that speaks for him. It now stands as evidence of what he saw, what he tried to point toward, and what he hoped someone in the future would understand. Modern investigators were finally able to read his warning. They could see the fear he could not say out loud. They learned the truth about his sister, his family, and the events that followed that day. The image that once looked like a simple portrait now carries meaning far beyond what anyone in 1910 imagined. Benjamin's story is no longer a missing child case from old newspaper clippings. It is a story of a boy who tried to leave a sign in plain view, and after 114 years, the world finally saw it.